the Eagles yesterday with a huge 41-7 win over the Cowboys, locking themselves into the 2 seed, giving them essentially an opportunity to rest some guys this week as we bring in our guy Zach Berman, who of course covers the Eagles for PHLY and joins us frequently on the show. Zach, let's start with the Saquon Barkley stuff here, because they obviously rode him pretty hard yesterday. 31 carries, got him to 167 rushing yards yesterday, which put him over 2,000, which it is notable that he did it in 16 games. He didn't need the 17th game to do it, but still short of Eric Dickerson's record. Is there any indication about how they're going to handle this? I assume they just rest him. That would seem to be the smart thing here. But where do things stand on what's been a remarkable season for Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, Adam and Bo, because it really is the biggest question here in Philadelphia. We have a show coming up at 2 where the title is to play or not to play, because that's really what everyone wants to know. Nick Sirianni wasn't ready to say what he would do yesterday. In the locker room, players were split. First off, Saquon Barkley said he'll leave it up to Nick Sirianni. He can understand both sides of it. Some of the offensive linemen, I spoke to Jordan Mailata, team captain, who said he absolutely wants to play. He wants Saquon to get that record. And he said as a captain, he's going to go up to Nick Sirianni and tell Nick Sirianni that. But Lane Johnson said that, you'd rather be safe than sorry. He got 2,000 yards. That's a significant number. Eric Dickerson set the record in 16 games. The 2,000 was the significant for Lane Johnson. Me personally, I think that they'll sit the starters. I personally would want to see, as a reporter, Saquon go for it. I remember being on this show, it was probably 3-4 weeks ago, and I said, can you imagine the theater, the drama of Saquon going up against his former team, the team that let him go, that was chronicled on Hard Knocks, and have a chance to break the record. And at the time, it was like, well, I don't even know if he'll even be close to that. He's 101 yards away from breaking the record. I mean, against the Giants, Saquon can do that in a half. So it is fascinating. It's a dilemma for Nick Sirianni because history's on the line. This record has stood for 40 years, and Saquon's within a good shot of breaking it. But again, what happens if Saquon got injured? Or what happens if an offensive lineman got injured? Someone else on the field because of Saquon got injured. The goal is obviously for them to win the Super Bowl. And then one other quick thing I will add here that could be a variable in this is that Jaylen Herz obviously didn't play this past game. He missed most of the game before that with the concussion. So there is a school of thought that maybe they want to get Jaylen Herz some work, at least a half of a game, just to give him some momentum going into the postseason. So it's not as if he's 2 plus 3 weeks cold going into the game. So there's a lot of decisions on Nick Sirianni's hands. I'm going to speak to him today at 3:15 Eastern time. So we'll see if he has more information then.
The receipts there that were left over from Hard Knocks are unbelievable, and they're just going to live on forever. I mean, it's like a modern day Babe Ruth that we got to witness and have a camera inside the GM's office there for the Giants. Do you get the sense that Saquon, like, what would it mean to him, or is he kind of more? I mean, we've heard quotes from him throughout the season, but you cover him. Do you think that's something that he, if given the opportunity, would take advantage of?
Yes. Knowing Saquon a bit and having I've had a lot of conversations with him about the history of the running back position. And he really is a student of the position. Like, he can tell you numbers of the great running backs, and he can break down all these different running backs. He's not the type of player who just shows up on Sunday and doesn't know what came before him. I asked him one time why he's like this, and he says he wants to be Michael Strahan when his career is finished, right? He wants to be in the media talking football, and then talking kind of life events, pop culture, things like that. So he is very in tune with what's going on. Now, that said, Saquon Barkley has demonstrated time and time again that his main objective here is winning, something that he wasn't able to do with the Giants. He even said yesterday he didn't know what a hat and T-shirt game was. This is someone who's never won the NFC East. And he did it in year one here. He had when the Eagles played the Giants the first time, and everything was about Saquon going back to the team that let him go. He was in position to set a franchise, or I'm sorry, to set a career high in rushing yards. He took himself out of the game basically in the fourth quarter. He said, "Let the other guys eat." So, I think Saquon Barkley, as someone who appreciates the history of the position, would want to get that record. But I also think he recognizes that, as he said yesterday, the goal is to put up banners.
So I want to get back to the quarterback situation a little bit too here, because the idea of getting Jaylen Herz some work, I understand it. So is it assumed that he's, going to be okay to come back? Whether he plays or not would be like cleared this week, because, all of a sudden I'm looking at some of the results of yesterday and the Packers falling to the 7th seed. Unless Washington, were to lose this weekend, which doesn't necessarily seem likely at this point. To me, that's a harder matchup to me that the Eagles just ended up with if Green Bay's coming to Philadelphia, and obviously your priority needs to be going in the playoffs with Jaylen Herz healthy.
Absolutely, Adam. So the first part of the question, he's still in the concussion protocol. I don't believe he was even in the building yesterday. Didn't practice at all last week. So he needs to get cleared first for this to even be a conversation. I don't know if or when he's going to get cleared. I'm not a doctor. I thought when it happened, it wasn't a serious concussion in the sense that he wanted to go back in the game. He was pushing to go back in the game. I saw him in the locker room afterwards. He was walking around like normal. But yeah, he was not cleared at all last week. So we'll see his status. I think the Eagles obviously want Jaylen and the starting group healthy going into the postseason. Now, there is some precedent here. If you think back to 2022, Jaylen was injured this time of the year, week 16, week 17 that year. And the Eagles played him in week 18, and they thought it was beneficial that they played him in week 18, giving him some momentum going into the postseason. Now, the difference, of course, is they clinched the number 1 seed that day. They had the bye week, so Jaylen could still get healthy or still get the rest. But I do know that that both Jaylen and the team thought it was beneficial that he got some work before the playoffs. So it's a conundrum there. Now, as far as the potential first round matchup, you're absolutely correct. I thought the afternoon and evening results did not favor the Eagles. I think Green Bay is a much tougher matchup for the Eagles than Washington. The Eagles have beaten both teams this year, but they beat Green Bay week 1 on a neutral field in Brazil. I think Green Bay has, I have this image in my mind. I remember being in Tampa last year, opening round of the playoffs. The Eagles were playing the Bucs the next day. I'm in my hotel room watching Green Bay against Dallas, and Green Bay goes into Dallas and just decimates the Cowboys, right? It was a complete domination. That's a team that I think can travel well. The cold weather wouldn't affect them. If I were the Eagles, I would rather see Washington than Green Bay. It certainly looks like they're going to see Green Bay.
The duo of Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee, fantastic yesterday. I think they were 13 for 19, almost 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. But the Pickett highlight, my God, did we get any insight as far as Kenny Pickett holding on to the football all the way to the ground? Otherwise a great day for Pickett. Yeah. But what was with that low light highlight for everybody around the NFL world?
Yeah, I think the ball was hit. From what I understand, I did not speak to Kenny about that play in particular. But yeah, I think the ball might, or his arm might have been hit. That certainly was a low light, but it's not something that has caught on much steam because the way the rest of the game went. Now, if you just kind of look at how those early drives were going, that absolutely would have been what everyone talked about if the Eagles didn't play much better thereafter. But you mentioned the quarterbacks. My co-host Bo Wolf, he's been touting Tanner McKee ever since McKee was a rookie in training camp last year, right? So this was Tanner McKee's first work, 2 touchdown passes on what, 4 attempts, perfect passer rating. So I think Bo's ready to give Tanner McKee his Hall of Fame speech when that happens.
So he's taking on the role of Mark Carman with Tyson Bagent in Chicago. I like that. I was seeing some of that on social media yesterday. Like there's this Tanner McKee fan club that exists there in Philadelphia. There were a lot of people very, very excited, and I did enjoy the whole AJ Brown accidentally throwing the football up into the stands, and then finding him, promising him the jersey, and then delivering it later. And I gotta say, those sweet, old school Kelly Green jerseys, that was a win for that fan. That was you get a signed AJ Brown, his game worn jersey over that football. You take that every single time.
Absolutely. And if I could give a quick plug for our PHLY Eagles show, that fan came on our post-game show yesterday to give the play-by-play account of what happened. So, great job by Jamie Lynch, our co-host, tracking him down. And it was a cool interview. It was like an hour after the game. He explained everything that happened, from AJ throwing the ball into the crowd to him catching it. Him actually getting the tickets like last minute to go to the game. AJ giving him the jersey. He even told us what AJ's jersey smelled like. Right, so all the viewers and listeners can check that out on the PHLY Eagles show yesterday. But yeah, I mean when AJ threw it into the crowd, he didn't realize at the time like that was Tanner's first touchdown. He got to the sideline. I think Sirianni might have said something to him, and then team security chief Dom DeSandro, head equipment manager or VP of equipment ops, I should say, Greg DeLamitros. They went over to the fan. Were able to get that ball. AJ presented it to Tanner McKee. It was a cool story all around.
Real quick, just the quarterback position in general, it's very reminiscent. Back in the Donovan McNabb days, remember he went out with an injury, and it was like Detmer and then AJ Feely emerged, and they won some big games, and I think earned like a first round bye that season. Yeah. Now it's a very different age of Eagles football, but very reminiscent. Are they a product of the infrastructure, obviously playmaker wise, offensive line, or like who gets the credit for these guys coming in and not really missing a beat?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bill, because look, Howie Roseman was made fun of, if you will, when he used the line quarterback factory when the Eagles drafted Jaylen Herz in the second round. And look, it probably wasn't the best line to say at the time, but what he meant is that the organization is going to always invest in quarterback depth. And it's frankly why the Eagles went out and they traded for Kenny Pickett this offseason. When I thought they should have kind of cleared the deck for Tanner McKee to be the backup, but anytime they can acquire a quarterback, anytime they can draft a quarterback late, they're going to do it. They're always on the lookout for developmental quarterbacks. And Jeffrey Lurie's told me this, the team owner Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman's told me this. No organization they feel has benefited more from the backup quarterback position than the Eagles. And what they mean is they literally won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, who was their backup quarterback that year being the Super Bowl MVP. Michael Vick came in as the third quarterback. He eventually takes over for Donovan McNabb after Kevin Kolb, who was drafted to be the replacement, got hurt. The Eagles were in depth. They traded Kevin Kolb for a second-round pick. You mentioned A.J. Feely. They traded A.J. Feely for a second-round pick. There's a reason why in my 13 years covering the team, they usually have a quarterback in place, or they're able to go get that quarterback. So where does that credit go? It goes first to the player, but then I do think there's organizational structure in terms of identifying, developing quarterbacks.
I don't remember that Cobb deal. I've actually chosen to black that out from my memory.
Fair enough. I hear you there.
Hey, Zach, last thing for you. I'm just, since the Eagles are sort of locked in here in the 2 spot, as you guys are looking at the possible matchups and a realistic road to the Super Bowl, it appears to me that this is a tough road. If I'm looking at this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could play Green Bay, and then would they have to play Detroit? possibly.
Well, it depends who the 1 seed is, right? Like if it depends if it's Detroit or Minnesota as the 1 seed. But
well, I guess
they could have
the winner, whoever ends up in
yeah
that 5 spot.
yeah.
There's a scenario that they would then have to play the Eagles if the Eagles survive the first round, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Unless, that would be unless there's an upset of the 3 seed, they would play the 4-5 winner, right? So that would be they would have to beat the whole NFC North basically to get to the Super Bowl. And that is a tough road. I mean, I'll defer to you there. You've seen those teams 6 times this year, or 5 times, then a 6th time this weekend. That said, it's kind of like the conversation of I hear Oregon fans complaining about the draw they have with Ohio State, and they didn't get Boise State, they didn't get Arizona State. But the reality is this, and this is the way I view it: if you're in the playoffs, you got to beat good teams, and you don't complain about your draw. If you're going to win, you don't look for the easy draw. You beat the team in front of you. If you're good enough to win the NFC Championship, if you're good enough to win the Super Bowl, you need to beat good teams along the way.
Yeah, but I do think it speaks to the importance of getting that 1 seed if you can,
Sure.
right? And that opportunity last week. I mean, can't control injuries, but with Jaylen Herz going out, certainly made the road a lot harder for the Eagles. Certainly doesn't rule anyone out. I'd also like to shout out that I know we've had a few years where the 7 seed kind of ends up. I mean, there was the year the Bears ended up sneaking as the 7 seed and they didn't belong at all, and they got basically demolished by the Saints. But you look at a year like this, I think both 7 seeds are going to end up being deserving, and especially in the NFC, where you look at what's transpired in the NFC North, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that with the Vikings, Lions, and Packers, they should all be in the playoffs, and by expanding the playoffs, they're rewarding those teams, and on top of that, I like entertainment. I like more football, and they've turned Wild Card Weekend into a lot more fun with having 6 games.
You're absolutely right. I mean, to the point about the 1 seed, this is my 13th year covering the Eagles. During that span, they've made the Super Bowl twice. Both of those times, they were the 1 seed, right? The only times they've been the 1 seed, they've made the Super Bowl. It's such an advantage, especially now when there's only one team that gets the bye. It's even more of an advantage. And yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of more football. I'm in favor of that 1 seed carrying more value. Therefore, that's the only team getting the bye. So it makes sense. Now, if you're in Buffalo, if you're in Philly right now, you probably wish 2 teams got byes in each conference. But like I said, if you're going to make the Super Bowl, you got to beat good teams.
All right, Zach, great stuff. Appreciate it. We'll be following you at ZBerm on Twitter, and I'm going to have to check out that interview with the fan yesterday. I didn't realize that happened. That's a great get and perfect for what we're doing here at ALLCITY. So awesome stuff, man.
We all silly like the mayor.